And good evening, I'm Tom Llamas, joined by my colleague tonight, Jose Diaz-Balart, broadcasting from Miami. It's currently 3 a.m. where we are in Israel, and the IDF has pledged a full air, land, and sea attack on Hamas in the Gaza Strip. More than 1 million civilians heeding a warning from Israel's armed forces, scrambling to move out of the northern Gaza Strip, told to leave their homes because of an imminent ground offensive which has not yet come, but air assaults into Gaza continue. Thousands have moved towards Gaza's border with Egypt amid diplomatic promises earlier today that some foreign nationals could leave. But that crossing, as you see it here, remains closed. The UN says Gaza has run out of water, run out of fuel, and the World Health Organization says the evacuation orders are, quote, a death sentence for the sick and injured who were being treated in Gaza's northern hospitals.
The death toll at this hour, at least 1,300 killed in Israel, more than 2,200 dead in Gaza in the 8 days since a horrifying terror attack from Hamas sparked this war. At least 29 American citizens are among the dead. 15 are missing, along with one permanent U.S. resident. The Israeli government says people from 43 different countries are among those dead or missing. President Biden spoke with families of missing Americans today. He also spoke with the president of the Palestinian Authority for the first time since the war began. This, as we learn, U.S. intelligence had reported an increased threat of violence from Hamas, but no indication of the massive attack we saw 1 week ago. Tom, you're on the ground in Tel Aviv. What is it like there right now, a week after the massacre and possibly hours before the beginning of a ground invasion?
Well, so much uncertainty, and for so many, the scars are still fresh. I spoke to a couple who survived the Supernova Festival. They ran out. They were shot at by those Hamas terrorists. At one point, the boyfriend told me he stared into the eyes of the Hamas terrorists that these men had no souls, but that they were so precise in their attack. We also went to a demonstration here in Tel Aviv where families were crying just outside the Israeli military headquarters. They were protesting, demanding that Israel bring their loved ones back. I happened to speak to a woman who her daughter's best friend is missing, a young woman who was at that festival. And I asked her what it's like now that we're in day 7. She says every day it gets worse. They have no information. These kids were just out there trying to have a good time. And we also spoke to an Israeli American, I should say, who was at his synagogue on Saturday when he received word of what was happening in his homeland. He jumped on an airplane, leaving his family behind, telling them that he had to come here and fight. And he understands the complexity of what's about to happen, that once this ground invasion starts, him as an Israeli American will have to fight. War has come here to Israel once again, and there are innocent people in Gaza. There are terrorists that are there, but there are also innocent people who are trying to get out. We have a team of reporters tonight that are spanned all over the region. I want to start with Ellison Barber, who is near the Gaza-Israeli border tonight. And Ellison has been reporting for us for several days in this region. Ellison, I know I was speaking to you earlier tonight. It's been somewhat quiet, but talk to us about the tension, because we know at any moment this ground invasion could start.
Right, Tom, it is still quiet, but because of the fact that there is this tension that we have seen hundreds, at least 100+ military vehicles, tanks, all amassed near the border in different pockets, and we don't have access all the way up close, but we have seen so much activity, movements of military tanks, military vehicles, artillery, military equipment that would be heavy moving equipment, all of it near the border, massive troop presence. All of that is making these moments, these pockets of time where things are a bit quiet, feel very tense and very eerie. We have heard throughout the evening booms of artillery in the distance. We have seen at different points missiles coming from Israel headed towards Gaza, but that has not happened for hours. Right now, it is relatively quiet. The only noise we have heard in the last 45 minutes is the sound of drones and fighter jets overhead. There is no doubt there is a massive presence here. Israeli troops, Israeli forces, they are poised to launch some sort of ground assault at any minute. They definitely have all of the equipment there. Again, we have seen it firsthand as it has rolled by us, just tanks after tanks over the last few days, full of Israeli troops armed, headed towards Gaza. But for now, it is quiet. We are waiting to see what might happen. There are no civilians in this area. The only things you will see when you drive through this area are checkpoints of Israeli police, Israeli military, and then movements, flatbeds full of military equipment headed towards Gaza. Tom?
And Ellison, we were out there earlier tonight and we saw everywhere you look there are troops stationed on Israel's border with Gaza. I do want to ask you, we know there will be millions of Palestinians that are going to get caught up in the crossfire if they are not allowed to evacuate out of Gaza. But we also know there are several Palestinian Americans and there are American hostages right now being held by the Hamas terrorists. What is being done to get those Americans out?
For the hostages, we heard today from the head of the National Security Council for Israel, as he was speaking with reporters in Tel Aviv and was asked about negotiations talks. He said they are not and will not be negotiating with Hamas, that the war cabinet has decided they will launch this escalation of their counteroffensive, that they will attack by land, by sea, by air. They are not having talks and negotiations to get those hostages out. There are believed to be at least 100 people still being held inside of Gaza by Hamas militants, among them children. There is one family, an Israeli family, that has been missing, all four of them, the parents as well as two children. Those children, they are 3 years old and 9 months old. We were speaking with people in Tel Aviv a couple of days ago, and they had talked at the time about how they were frustrated that they felt like the government wasn't moving quickly enough to have a response to this. They told us, regardless of how they identified politically, that they wanted to see some sort of ground assault into Gaza to get those hostages out, and they wanted to see it days ago. So there is surely frustration. We have heard it, as you were reporting, from the families of those who are still missing, but also from people we have spoken to in Tel Aviv. There was this strong desire to see something happen quickly to try and get those hostages out. As the time passes, you have to imagine that their frustration is growing, waiting to see what may take place. In terms of the American Palestinians inside of Gaza, the State Department has said that they believe there are between 500 to 600 Palestinian Americans inside of Gaza. They have told them to try to get as close as they can to that Rafah crossing, the sole land crossing that doesn't lead into Israeli territory, that goes into Egypt. It is not open right now, but they told them to get near it because if it were to open, they believe there would be little notice and that it would only be open for a short period of time. At various moments today, Tom, we had reporting that the U.S. was talking with Israel, with Egypt and Jordan about that border being open. It did not happen. People are still stuck there waiting, Palestinian Americans, not to mention the massive amount of people, the 1.1 million people that are in the area where the IDF has said they need to evacuate and move south past the Gaza River. It is very difficult to move within Gaza right now, in part, as you mentioned, because they have no fuel. The sole power plant is out of fuel. There are constant attacks. We saw convoys hit on Friday that were carrying civilians headed towards the border. The situation there is dire for everyone, and there aren't a whole lot of answers right now for what will happen next. Tom?
Ellison Barber at the Gaza-Israel border, thank you very much. Humanitarian organizations are sounding the alarm about the fate of the civilians in Gaza as many are fleeing their homes. Israeli airstrikes continue, but have slowed as Israeli troops prepare for that ground invasion. Sky News reporter Diana Magnay takes us inside Gaza, and I want to warn you, some of the images you're about to see are disturbing.
The long walk south from Gaza City, clutching for most just a small bag. Israel promised safe passage to the million-plus Palestinians it has ordered to leave their homes in northern Gaza, the deadline expiring hours ago now. Few trusted that promise. Not after a direct hit on this truck on Friday afternoon, filled with people following Israel's evacuation order. The aftermath is far too bloody to show you. 70 people were killed here. There are the bodies of children sprawled across the truck. It's a scene of literal carnage. The injured rushed to Gaza's hospitals. Here, back into Gaza City, the Shifa hospital has seen emergency all week, and it does not stop. Children rushed in for urgent treatment. Others suddenly alone, lost in all the chaos. "I need Daddy," this little girl cries, but he's inside and strangers must step in. This is social media video from the same hospital. Watch the ambulance driver, just back from the scene, distraught at what he's witnessed. "Tell the people to go home," he says. "They bombed displaced people in trucks and in lorries. They bombed lorries and ambulances and everyone," another man adds. Israel says they do not target civilians. That's why they're asking them to leave Gaza City, they say. It's an active war zone and the next stage is coming. 35,000 people have taken shelter at Shifa Hospital now. Why should they leave if they think they'll die either way? And how to move so many badly injured. There's not much for them further south. Crowded quarters, hundreds of families here at a UN school in central Gaza with nothing but a bit of bedding for a lucky few. Some who left their homes, others who have no home left. "Our house was bombed," this woman says. "It was bombed along with the houses around us. We left without clothes and without anything. I want to return to my home." At the Rafah crossing from Gaza into Egypt, dual nationals gathered, hopeful that diplomatic efforts would offer them a way out. But for now, it's staying shut. Hamas says Israel is tricking people into leaving. Israel says Hamas is using them as human shields. Stuck in the middle, civilians with no way out, waiting to see where the bombs fall next. Diana Magnay, Sky News.
Diana Magnay with Sky News. We've got a lot more ahead, including a breakdown of how people in Gaza are attempting to evacuate and the challenges they are facing. Plus an update on the protests breaking out across the globe, putting law enforcement on high alert. And next, we're live near the Gaza border in the Israeli city of Ashdod on the IDF's efforts to target the leaders of Hamas. 16 past the hour. We are learning more tonight about how terrorists from Gaza carried out their brutal and deadly attacks against Israel last week. The elaborate plan hatched by a Hamas mastermind who is now on Israel's most wanted list. Raf Sanchez is following that for us tonight. Raf.
Jose, Israel's military says it has launched an all-out hunt for Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader responsible for Saturday's attack. They say he is their Osama bin Laden, and they are determined to find him no matter how long it takes.
Tonight, Israel vowing to track down and kill the man it holds responsible for the worst terror attack in the country's history. Yahya Sinwar is the leader of Hamas in Gaza, and Israel says the mastermind of Saturday's carefully orchestrated slaughter.
He chose to send the butchers into our bedrooms to kill our babies. And when they chose to go full front against Israel, they signed their own death warrants.
Allahu Akbar! Sinwar knows better than most the value of hostages as human bargaining chips. The son of Palestinian refugees, he was supposed to spend the rest of his life in an Israeli jail after being convicted of terrorism. But in 2011, he was freed in a prisoner swap. Israel releasing him and 1,000 other Palestinians to secure the freedom of Gilad Shalit, an Israeli soldier held captive by Hamas in Gaza for 5 years. Today, Sinwar controls the fate of the hostages, including Yoni Asher's wife Doron and their 2 little daughters, Raz and Aviv. Doron seen here being blindfolded, one hand around her daughter's shoulder, her mother next to her.
When I saw this video, I couldn't believe what I'm seeing. This was the beginning of the route.
Using a tracker app, he followed the movements of his wife's cell phone.
When I see the streets name, and I recognize this is Gaza. It was hard to believe.
If you could speak to the people who are holding your family, what would you tell them?
Show some decency. Show some respect. If you are real soldiers, you will let them go. You will do no harm.
Israel says the attack was spearheaded by members of an elite Hamas commando unit, and that it's already begun targeting them from the air inside Gaza. New documents tonight obtained by NBC News show Hamas fighters carried detailed diagrams highlighting the weak points of Israeli tanks. Israel has bitter experience in settling the score. After 11 of its Olympic athletes and coaches were murdered by Palestinian terrorists at the 1972 Munich Games, the Jewish state began a years-long worldwide hunt for those responsible. Now it's vowing to do the same to the men who committed a far greater massacre.
We are going to destroy Hamas so that they can never ever wield the sword of death over our heads again.
But killing Hamas's leader may be the easy part. Securing a long-term peace in Gaza will be far harder.
And Jose, I've actually met that Hamas leader, Yahya Sinwar. 5 years ago, I was part of a group of international journalists he sat down with as part of a public diplomacy campaign trying to get Israel to loosen its blockade on on Gaza rather. I can tell you he is very intense. Meeting the press was not his comfort zone. He is a fighter, not a politician. And Jose, he has not been seen or heard from since Saturday. Israeli officials tell me they believe he has gone underground into that network of tunnels that Hamas runs beneath Gaza. Jose?
A fighter, not a politician, a terrorist as well. Ralph Sanchez, thank you very much. After the break, Tom will speak with an Israeli-based journalist about what the Israeli people are feeling as their country is at war.
Welcome back to our special coverage of the Israeli-Hamas war. Tonight, Israel's defense forces are gearing up for what they are calling an expanded area of conflict, looking to carry out an all-encompassing invasion into Gaza on land, in the air, and at sea. Troops by the hundreds of thousands are standing by, waiting to answer the call from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But what would that ground invasion look like, and what would it actually mean? Here's Sky News' Deborah Haynes with more.
Israel's war is about to widen, marking their weapons. The next stage could be a combination of air, sea and land strikes. There'll be an emphasis on what the military's describing as significant ground operations. Troops listen as a top commander tells them their country is watching, and from here they move forward.
Those who witness these difficult, unimaginable sights on Shabbat will also have the privilege of witnessing the great victory of the IDF and the State of Israel over Hamas.
Israeli forces are also mobilizing in the north, where they've struck another enemy, Hezbollah, in next-door Lebanon. Last week's carnage erupted on this man's watch. Benjamin Netanyahu now meeting with soldiers in southern Israel. They tell him about the Hamas attack against communities here that triggered this war. Are you ready? He asks. This was one of the places the Prime Minister visited. The kibbutz of Kfar Aza is a hellscape. Israeli forces describe what happened here as a massacre. No rush to remove the killers.
Yes, here in the kibbutz.
We met one soldier who just found out a friend and her partner had been confirmed dead.
We traveled together, and she was a good friend. And let's go to your house. The worst news? I don't know. Just think about your friend who just gone, and you not see him again. Not have any words.
And obviously you're a soldier. I mean, you're part of the military response. Like, how does it make you want to have revenge?
I don't want revenge. I just want justice.
And if the order came, would you be ready to go into Gaza if you had to?
If I had to, I will go.
And you're not scared?
No.
You can see Gaza in the distance about a mile away. It's from there that the Hamas militants came. They broke through fences like this one. You can see here the twisted metal as they tore through and then rampaged through the communities. There's a heavy Israeli military presence here now as they prepare for the next phase in their response. And as we were standing here, we could hear the distant sound of gunfire. Israel's war on Gaza has largely been fought from a distance for now. That's about to change. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Southern Israel.
Our thanks to Deborah from our partners at Sky News for that report. In his first public appearance outside of his office since the war began, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited troops on the front lines today. Here's that video. He told them that, quote, the next stage of this is coming. That, of course, came hours before we got the announcement from the IDF that an integrated and coordinated attack from the air, sea, and land on Gaza is being prepared. We are waiting for that attack to happen at any moment. But Netanyahu is also battling a different war at home. Independent journalist Noga Tarnopolsky writes, incompetence against Hamas and indifference to Israeli suffering has the public boiling over. And Amit Segal, a journalist considered very close to the prime minister, said on a radio panel that, quote, it is hard to see how he can survive this. Joining us now is the author of that piece, Noga. Noga, thank you so much for being here. I want to ask you, for our viewers at home, they may be a little confused. You are a country at war. We just saw Netanyahu form that unity government, and yet you're writing that the people here in Israel are not united behind him?
That's right. And there was even a protest, a modest protest of around 1,000 people today in Tel Aviv, right here, calling for him to resign. It's confusing because on American terms, we think that everyone will gather under the flag, and that means supporting the prime minister. But for Israelis, gathering under the flag means going to the army, being purposeful, protecting the country. It doesn't necessarily mean supporting this prime minister.
To be fair, I think I was at that same protest earlier today, and there were also people demonstrating to get the hostages to release their loved ones. That was a big part of the protest as well. And then there was that part where people were protesting against the prime minister. I'm curious, as somebody who follows sort of the vibe of what is happening in this country, where is the country when it comes to the invasion that is about to happen?
I think people are full of fear about this invasion, in part because it's their kids who are being sent to invade. But they're also terrified because of the hostages. Israel has an unknown number of hostages, probably around 200 people. And these families today, in their own way, were also protesting against the prime minister. They were saying, don't take a single step until you bring our loved ones home first. So I would say that the country is still in shock about the Hamas attack and bewildered.
As you watch, and there was that 24-hour deadline imposed on the people of northern Gaza to move south, that has come and gone. The ground invasion hasn't started yet. There's been a lot of tough talk. There's obviously been a lot of rockets and shelling on both sides. We know the forces are lined up on the border. Our teams have shown that. What do you think the Israeli forces are going to wait for? Or do you think it could happen at any moment?
I think it's the Israeli political echelons who are waiting. I think Netanyahu has to be coordinated with the United States. And I think for the army, they have to have a plan in place. And I'm not sure they do just now.
Do you think the relationship between President Biden and the prime minister in public, the president has been very supportive, but behind the scenes, there's reporting that they've said for Israel to keep in mind the innocent Palestinians that are going to be in Gaza and likely will be killed once this war starts? It is impossible to move millions of people like we're seeing. Do you think that is happening?
Without question. Absolutely without question. The United States is keeping extremely close contact. And reporting here in Israel has it that Netanyahu told his cabinet on Tuesday that Israel will observe the rules of war. But there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. The fact that a country observes the rules of war does not mean, sadly, that there won't be civilian casualties.
Noga, you know, today marks a week from that attack at the Supernova Festival, the terrorist act that started all of this. I spoke with a couple earlier that had been there. they're getting therapy because there are now volunteer therapists and psychiatrists that are working around the clock to help people who were there and the families that are suffering now. As an Israeli, what was it like to see your people treated that way, killed that way? And now it's been a week and the entire world watching what the response is going to be.
It's almost surreal, I have to tell you. I never expected, as an Israeli or as a journalist, to cover this sort of atrocity, this intentional savagery. And it's hard to find the words. I think the whole country's feeling that.
How long, since you cover politics and you cover global affairs, how long do you think the world will stay focused on this? And do you think that is being sort of entered into the calculation of how the military responds?
I think probably not, and I think the world won't pay attention for that long. More importantly for Netanyahu, I don't think the Israeli people are going to support him for a long campaign. I think he has to find a way to bring these people home and a way to resolve this probably within a few weeks, or he was going to lose whatever amount of support he still has among the Israeli people.
I can tell you from being back home in America, Americans still are very sort of invested and wanting to know because of the large, obviously, Jewish American population in our country, but just the world of what's happened here. And I think the images that we've seen out of the terrorist attacks, and again, the images that we're seeing out of Gaza, I think still has the world sort of completely focused on this region. Noga, we thank you for your time and for your perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to be moving on now. Up next, from London to Germany to India, police on high alert as protests break out across the globe, with some turning violent. Stay with us. Welcome back to our special coverage across the platforms of NBC News. This weekend, protests are breaking out across the globe, and some of them are growing increasingly violent. Police in major cities now on high alert. Here's NBC's George Solis.
From coast to coast, large protests erupting in cities across the country. Tensions rising 1 week after Hamas terrorists staged the deadliest attack on Israel in a generation.
What is the message to the Jewish community, not just here in New York, but nationally, globally, that's listening and wants to know what guidance, what to do next?
The message to the Jewish community and all who are friends of the Jewish community and supporters of Israel is the need for solidarity. Nothing would make us happier than if Hamas laid down their weapons and marched out of Gaza with their hands in the air. But in all likelihood, that's not going to happen.
1, 2, 3, 4. Thousands of people in the streets of cities like Chicago, Houston, and Los Angeles, where NBC's David Noriega reports.
Here in LA, there are hundreds out marching in support of the Palestinian people. Many of them are Palestinians themselves with a personal stake in this conflict, including those who are struggling to stay in touch with their loved ones in Gaza.
Masmia says her fiancé is in Gaza.
Have you been able to communicate with them?
Yes, I spoke with him last about 8 to 10 hours ago, but it's very difficult to get through because there's no internet, as you may know, and no electricity.
Overseas, massive protests in Germany, Pakistan, and India.
We want boycott! We want boycott! We want sanctions! We want sanctions!
Today in London, police deploying hundreds of officers on this pro-Palestinian demonstration with a warning. Anyone showing support for Hamas would be arrested. Law enforcement around the globe on high alert. France mobilizing 7,000 soldiers after a man fatally stabbed a teacher and injured 3 others. The attack being investigated by anti-terrorism prosecutors. President Emmanuel Macron saying the country had been a victim of Islamic terrorism. The U.S. emotions still high after days of rallies. In New York, demonstrators vowing to stay in the streets.
How many more days or how long will these protests continue, do you think?
We're going to be out in the streets every day, as long as it takes.
Late Friday, more than 60 people were arrested at a rally. The demonstrators making their way outside Senator Chuck Schumer's home. Some residents here remaining vigilant, saying safety is still a concern.
I'm Jewish. I live in New York, and I'm afraid of walking around in New York.
Our thanks to George Solis for that report. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Palestinian Americans and their supporters have taken to the streets in protests. NBC's David Noriega is standing by at a pro-Palestinian rally in L.A. with the details. David, what did you see there today?
Yeah, Jose, Tom, what we saw today was a big rally. Some 2,000 pro-Palestinian protesters gathered here outside the Israeli consulate. They shut down Wilshire Boulevard, a major street in L.A., for several hours. There were a couple of flare-ups. We saw one verbal confrontation between protesters and a single pro-Israel counter-protester that was resolved peacefully. At one point, protesters tried to shut down the 405 freeway, which is about a mile behind me. Police prevented them from doing that. All in all, a tense but largely peaceful manifestation today. You know, there were a lot of Palestinian Americans, but there were also a lot of other groups of people here too, including a pretty sizable contingent of Jewish peace activists, so American Jews who are opposed to Israel's policies. One of them actually approached us and said, you know, please report that there are Jews here. We interviewed her, and this is what she had to say.
I'm afraid that what we are about to witness is a genocide on Palestinians. I'm terrified that what we are seeing with the water running out, the hospital saying that their generators are about to be depleted of fuel, no fuel coming in, that we are about to witness something that we just have never seen in our lifetime.
Emotions running high at this protest today. Tom, Jose.
David Noriega, thank you so very much.
All right, and when we come back, an important report on the evacuation of northern Gaza, the efforts underway by Palestinians to make their way south as Israeli forces prepare for the next step in their attacks on Hamas and recovering hostages. Stay with us. Welcome back. As we've reported, the Israeli military has ordered about half of the Gaza Strip to evacuate farther south in advance of a stepped-up military offensive. A task the UN has called, quote, impossible, and medical groups running the hospitals there, including the Palestinian Red Cross, have heavily criticized that order. Molly Hunter joins us tonight live from London. Molly, I know you're going to walk us through exactly what this all means and the process, but I'd like to start with you explaining to our viewers just how far some of these Palestinian families are trying to walk out of northern Gaza to the south, walking with their families while trying to dodge rockets.
Yeah, Tom, that's exactly right. And walking is exactly the right word. Walking, bicycling, on the back of horse carts, donkeys. Some cars, of course, still have fuel, but no fuel is even getting into the Gaza Strip. So you are very lucky if you can even hitch a ride on a car. Those pictures have been harrowing. Look, the Gaza Strip, Tom, only runs about 25 miles. So if you're moving from the north to the south, and we do have a map up just right here. So North Gaza, Gaza City, you're trying to get past kind of the midway point. It's called Wadi Gaza, which will show you may be traveling 10, 12 miles, which in the conditions, as you mentioned, dodging bombs, there is no ceasefire, no guaranteed safe passage, is extremely dangerous. I just want to show you these two main roads. These are the two roads the Israeli military has identified as safe passage. That main road running down the center of the Gaza Strip is Salah Hadin. But Tom, civilians we have talked to today say there is no guaranteed safe passage, say there is no ceasefire, and we know at least one convoy was hit today. Now, I do just want to go to the specific evacuation zone. That is the area of evacuation, northern Gaza. The goal to get south of Wadi Gaza. It includes Gaza City. That is the main population center. But even if civilians, Tom, get south to Khan Yunis, it's one of the big cities in the southern part of the Strip, there's no guarantee they're safe. And Khan Yunis was pounded by Israeli airstrikes today. I do just want to give you a sense of the population in that area. That specific red area, that northern part of Gaza, to get below Wadi Gaza, it's about 1.1 million, about half of the total population of the Gaza Strip. You can see here it compares to Austin, San Francisco. San Francisco, of course, 808,000. Seattle, Denver. That is a lot of people. We have no estimate tonight, Tom, how many people have stayed in their houses who have not been able to leave. I do just want to draw your attention, though, to a couple of hospitals. There you see Al-Shifa and Al-Quds in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. The head of Al-Shifa Hospital says tonight 35,000 people, Tom, are still at that hospital. It's one of the only hospitals, one of the only buildings, I should say, with generator power in that area. So people think that it might be safe to stay there. You mentioned the Palestinian Red Cross. They run the Al-Quds Hospital, and they have said today They are still giving life-saving treatment. They still have patients they cannot evacuate. Tom, such an important reminder that even with this warning from the Israeli military, civilians and hospitals are still protected under international humanitarian law. And then I do just want to show you a few stats for our audience. Population 2.2 million in the Gaza Strip, unemployment almost 50%. The poverty rate, 59.8, that rate surely will go up as no food, no water, no fuel, of course, as we've discussed, is getting in. The population under 15, Tom, nearly 50%. That is why doctors are telling us they are seeing so many kids who have been injured and killed in these airstrikes. And finally, I just want to bring our audience, you heard Ellison talking about this area at the beginning of your show. This is Rafah. This is the only way out of the Gaza Strip. It is in the south of the Gaza Strip. Now, the State Department says they have told Americans to get close to that crossing just in case that it opens. But the word that we have tonight, Tom, from the Israelis and the Egyptians is that it remains closed.
Molly Hunter pointing out such an important fact in all of this. We call it an evacuation, but right now Palestinian families cannot really evacuate out of Gaza. They can just move south because all the borders are closed. Molly, thanks for that explainer.
And joining us now is retired Admiral James Stavridis. He is the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO and an MSNBC Chief International Analyst. Admiral, it's always great to see you. You know, the IDF says it's preparing an imminent attack by air, by land, and sea. What can we expect to see in this first phase of a ground invasion?
Jose and Tom, we're already seeing it. What is happening is special forces are flooding into Gaza City. They're attempting, above all, to find and fix the location of these hostages. If they can, they'll try and extract the hostages. Those are going to be very difficult operations. At the same time, you're seeing precision-guided strikes that are going after ammunition, fuel, command and control, taking out the ability of Hamas to respond when the inevitable ground assault begins, probably in 24 to 48 hours. Final thought, you're also seeing a lot of probing activity from the sea. The Israelis have excellent, if you will, equivalents of the U.S. Navy SEALs. They are very capable of coming in from the sea. That's a less defended flank. So all of that is occurring now. Call it phase one of this operation. Phase two, I think, will start in the next 24 to 48 hours.
Admiral, I'd be interested in your thoughts about the issue of evacuations. You know, in history, we've seen in 2006 when Hezbollah attacked Israel, 2 million Lebanese moved from south to north. When the war in Ukraine began, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians were able to evacuate and leave, many going to Poland and in other countries. What is the most pressing problem for these hundreds of thousands of people that are in North Gaza and their ability to go south?
It's an extraordinarily difficult and tragic situation, without question. Three things to focus on here. One is the transit routes themselves. The Israelis need to guarantee safe passage on these roads moving south. And frankly, Hamas needs to allow people to leave. They've shown a desire to keep as many civilians, if you will, kind of trapped in Gaza City. Why? Because they know the Israelis will alter their military plans, will do everything they can to avoid casualties. So safe routes out. Number two, necessity for locations they can go to. If they are not going to be allowed to get into Egypt, which appears to be the case at the moment, the international community needs to establish camps, safe sites for them in the southern part of Gaza and be taking the next step, preparing them forward in Egypt, because I think inevitably the Egyptians are going to agree to take these populations. A good situation to compare this to, which both of you know well, is Syria. 21 million Syrians at the start of that war, 7 million now across those borders. I think that's how we're going to end up here. Those are the first two things to focus on, and I'll close with this. You're pointing out quite correctly The ultimate tragedy are these hospitals in Gaza City. They can't be expedited out. Therefore, they need to be safe from Israeli strikes. I think the Israelis will avoid hitting them, but it's a complex problem both in the city, the safe routes out, and ultimately camps either across the border or still inside Gaza.
Admiral, let's transition to the pending and what is likely going to be a ground invasion into Gaza. Israel, as we all know, has one of the most feared, one of the most respected militaries. But we have seen time and time again throughout history what happens when established militaries take on guerrilla fighters, and in this case, terrorists who don't wear uniforms and terrorists who are now living underground in those tunnels. This is going to be a long, drawn-out conflict, in your opinion?
It is, Tom, and if we look at a fairly recent analog, go back to the Iraq War, the United States, in the Battle of Fallujah, about 20 years ago, 2 regiments of U.S. Marines, arguably the best shock troops in the world, were given the order to take Fallujah. Very, very difficult. That took weeks and weeks and weeks. I think this could stretch into months, Tom.
Admiral James Stavridis, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Very much appreciate your perspective. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to get the latest on the ground from Tom and our team of journalists live in Israel as the country prepares the next steps in its war with Hamas, and speak with an American-Israeli reservist now joining the fight. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm Jose Diaz-Balart. It is 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, and 4 a.m. right now in Israel, where my friend and colleague Tom Llamas is reporting on the growing Israel-Hamas war.
Good evening again, Jose, from Tel Aviv. Tonight, the region is on the verge of a full-scale war, as we know, just a week after a terror attack happened here in Israel. It claimed more than 1,000 lives, a death toll that has doubled as fighting continues. At this moment, Israel is poised to invade Gaza from land, air, and sea as hundreds of thousands tried to heed Israel's orders to move south, but faced with very little options. The U.S. today announced that American citizens trapped in Gaza have a way out through the border with Egypt, but so far they have not been let through. And we just have some new reporting from our teams in Washington that has just come in saying that this process is getting harder and harder, and there still has been no agreement to let those Americans out. Now, the citizens, U.S. citizens trying to flee Israel, were able to take off today, while non-essential personnel working at the embassies, including their families, have also been told that they can leave. U.S. officials say 29 Americans are confirmed killed in the Hamas terror attacks. President Biden late today talked to the leaders of both Israel and the Palestinian Authority as the crisis here grows, the region and the world on edge, waiting to see what happens next.
Tonight, all eyes on Gaza as Israel prepares for an all-out assault on Hamas. As the Israeli military announces there will be an integrated and coordinated attack from the air, sea, and land, but still waiting to launch. This as more than 1 million Palestinians in northern Gaza try to make their way south, on foot, even by carts pulled by donkeys. The escape from Gaza dangerous and deadly. Graphic video showing the aftermath. Convoys, a total of 70 people, including children, killed in missile strikes. Palestinians saying these were innocent lives killed by Israeli bombs. American citizens are among those in Gaza trying to get to safety. And tonight, the United States is working to secure a safe exit for them in the south at the Rafah border crossing in Egypt. The Karoud family is desperate for help. 12 family members, one as young as 4, all American citizens trying to get out.
We are constantly worried. I don't think I've ever been this worried in my life.
Tonight, the efforts to evacuate Americans inside Israel are also underway, including non-essential embassy workers from Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. As Israel continues its bombardment of Gaza, Hamas officials claim more than 20 hostages have been killed in those same strikes. This as President Biden is vowing to the families of Americans being held hostage in Gaza.
I assured them my personal commitment to do everything possible to return every missing American to their families.
Bring them home! Bring them home!
In Israel, we were there as hundreds gathered, demanding that the hostages be brought home.
We're in the center of Tel Aviv right now, just outside the Israeli military headquarters, where hundreds of Israelis have gathered, demanding that they release the hostages inside of Gaza. You can read some of their signs here. They say it very clearly, bring them home, while others are holding photos of the people that have been kidnapped and disappeared. People like Lidi.
Bring them home! Bring them home!
Abigail Hayut is among those searching for loved ones. Her daughter's best friend, Mia, is still missing.
How hard is it to just not know?
For 7 days, it's like hell and back every day. Every day, every day. She didn't do nothing.
All along the border, the signs are clear. Israel is getting ready to go in. Tonight, Israeli tanks and soldiers prepared for battle. Shai doesn't want us to use his last name. He's an Israeli American called up to fight. Last week, he went to his synagogue in New York with his young children. Today, he's on the front lines in Israel, a captain in the military.
How did you explain that to them, and how difficult was it to leave?
To be honest, I didn't explain to them too much. You can't really explain to an 8-year-old. In fact, I hope to God that he doesn't see any of the footage, because it's absolutely horrific.
Shai is ready to do his duty, but knows that innocent civilians will likely pay the price.
I know war is not fair and it doesn't really make sense. How do you explain that? Because there are Palestinian Americans there too.
Yeah. So to be honest, I feel really bad for the Palestinians, because there are many Palestinians in Gaza that are innocent. We always try to minimize civilian casualties, but at the same time, we have to understand that they're not giving us another choice.
And Jose, as you know, many people in America who have dual citizenship, America is their home, but they also have another homeland. And for Shai, as you heard, that is here in Israel, is why he jumped on an airplane to fight in this war. And he told me, when I asked him if he was ready to give his life for his country if he had to take down Hamas, he said he couldn't answer that, but he was here to complete the mission, which, you know, Jose, means exactly that.
Yeah, and you know, a mission that is prompted by a massacre of hundreds of people, many who were home, some were in a concert for peace. And Tom, that woman who is holding the picture of her daughter, we're talking about a week now since they have any information about them. It's just brings it so close to home. This is about men, women, and children. So I want to bring in NBC's Raf Sanchez, who is in Ashdod, Israel. Raf, we've been watching for this ground invasion. It seems imminent.
It does, Jose. Everything we're seeing on the ground indicates that Israel is preparing for an imminent ground offensive on a scale unlike anything we have ever seen before. When you drive the highways of southern Israel, you are surrounded by the rumbling trailers that are moving tanks and artillery into position. Every couple of minutes, you are seeing Israeli jeeps moving by, carrying more troops. The fields around the Gaza border, there are now camped out artillery, tanks positioned. You can hear the guns going during the daylight hours. The aircraft are overhead at all times. And Jose, Israel has mobilized more than 300,000 reservists. That is a military buildup unlike anything seen in this country in generations. You simply do not call that many troops up unless you are planning a major operation. Now, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is himself a former Special Forces officer, met with troops near the Gaza border earlier today. He put his hand on the shoulder of one of them. He said, "Are you ready for what is coming next?" He didn't specify, but I think all the soldiers there understood that they will be expected to go into Gaza to complete the mission, as Tom was saying earlier, of toppling Hamas. Now, we have been hearing these strikes for days, and we know that there is a humanitarian catastrophe unfolding inside of Gaza. This evacuation order that the Israeli military issued to basically the entire civilian population of the northern end of the strip is also unprecedented in its scale, and it seems to indicate that Israel is preparing to move into Gaza in a way that we have never seen before. Jose.
Ralph, I also want to ask you about Israel's strikes on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Those strikes killed 2 Lebanese civilians in the border area. Also, a journalist was killed there. How much concern is there right now about this conflict expanding?
There's a lot of concern, Jose. This week has been a nightmare that Israel can't wake up from, but the only way it could get worse is if what is about to be a very serious single-front war somehow turned into a multi-front war with Israel fighting simultaneously in both the south and the north. Now, there have been a number of sort of back and forth exchanges of fire over the border. In the early hours of this morning, Israel says a number of drones flew from Lebanon into Israeli airspace over the city of Haifa and other areas. Israel carrying out drone strikes against Hezbollah targets. Israel also says that 3 gunmen were killed as they tried to cross from Lebanon into Israel. So far, though, no sign Hezbollah is prepared to go to full-scale war. Jose, Tom.
Raf Sanchez for us tonight. Raf, we appreciate all of your reporting. I want to turn now to our other colleague who's reporting near the Israeli-Gaza border, and that's Ellison Barber. She's been reporting for NBC News all week. Ellison, many times that we've come to you, you've been dodging the volley of rockets that have gone between Hamas and Israel over the last week. I know today was a little more quiet, if that's fair to say, even that, because I know there was still some action. I do want to ask you, it's fair to say none of us here, none of the reporters working this, know exactly when this ground invasion is going to happen, but we do know that the border is now filled with military vehicles, filled with tanks, and there are Israeli troops as far as the eye can see.
Right. They appear to be ready to launch a ground offensive as soon as they make the decision to say go. In terms of troops, equipment, as Raf was describing there, it is everywhere. There are massive amounts of equipment, artillery, troops in a position to carry out a major offensive when they get the green light and the order to do just that. You were talking, Tom, in your reporting in the beginning about the Rafah crossing, and I do want to read to you some fairly new reporting that we have from our producers in Egypt. They say that the Palestinian embassy envoy to the Rafah border has said that Egypt will not open their border to let in the foreign Palestinians until Israel lets in humanitarian shipments. So as we're waiting to watch this ground offensive, and there have been those constant questions of what is going to happen, the back and forth we saw today of the U.S. at some point sending messages to Palestinian Americans inside of Gaza saying that possibly there was going to be a border opening at some point today, a window for them to get out into Egypt. We are now hearing from our producers in Egypt that what they are being told via the Palestinian envoy for that crossing is that Egypt is saying they will not open that until humanitarian shipments are allowed to enter by Israel. We have no indication right now that Israel has agreed to that. We don't know if that's something they would be open to. When I was speaking with an IDF spokesperson on Thursday and asked some questions about conversations or what they would support in terms of coordination with Egypt to let people out, they would not discuss, they said, diplomatic negotiations or conversations they're having. Tom, Jose.
Ellison, that's such important reporting that you pointed out there, because aid cannot get in and these people fleeing war cannot get out. Ellison Barber for us tonight. We're going to continue our special coverage here across all of the NBC News platforms on the Israel-Hamas war. After the break, an emotional look at flights to Israel, how Israeli Americans right now have to either say goodbye to loved ones or head into war themselves. And then Jose will have a very important interview. He speaks to one Israeli American reservist next who is already in the fight about the harrowing things he has seen so far. Stay with us.
16 past the hour. Following the unprecedented Hamas terror attack 1 week ago, Israel has called up more than 360,000 reservists to active duty. Thousands of men and women who just a week ago were living ordinary lives have answered the call after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared war on Hamas. NBC's Marisa Parra joins us now from Miami International Airport, where flights carrying reservists have been leaving from. Marisa, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, we can tell you what we saw just a few moments ago. People are boarding a flight that leaves from Miami International Airport for Tel Aviv, Israel tonight, that leaves just before midnight. And we saw people as they're lining up. They broke out in song, and I just heard from someone who told me that that is a Jewish national song in Hebrew. And so in terms of the mood, the emotion, it is complicated because you can imagine there's so many emotions that range a wide spectrum here. But I want to speak to the historic nature in terms of the efforts to get people in and out of the region, because we know just how difficult that has been. I'm outside of El Al. This is an Israeli airline that typically follows Shabbat. That is the Jewish time of rest, which includes Saturday. And for the first time in over 40 years, they have been operating flights during Shabbats. And we know there were flights earlier today out of New York. There's that flight tonight out of Miami. And many of those flights carrying Israeli army reservists. We know that the military, their military, has called up hundreds of thousands around the world. And we've seen that here locally. Just to give you a small perspective on what some families, including families behind me here, are going through, we spoke to a South Florida mother and father. They are originally from Israel. Their son, all of them now live here in South Florida. They described how their son decided to volunteer as soon as he heard the news 1 week ago today. And they described those moments. They said goodbye to him at the airport, not knowing when they would see him again.
He found out about the war at 7, and he was on the plane by 11 o'clock in the morning. Yes, it took him 5 minutes to make a decision, 10 minutes to pack, and we drove him to the airport.
That same day?
Few hours later, yes. So I took my little love bug and I gave it to David. And when he hugged me goodbye, he said, "Mom, I promise I'm gonna bring the love bug back." He promised me to bring it back. And I know he's gonna keep his promise. And he can lose the box as long as he brings David back, because he is my love bug. This is my love bug.
She says she sleeps with her phone close, just like so many Israeli and Palestinian families clinging to any update they can get. Jose, this is war. This is the reality of it, near and far. And so this is just a small perspective of what so many families are going through, have been going through for the last week, and continue to go through right here, right now, even behind me at the airport.
Marisa Parra at Miami International Airport. Thank you so much. And joining us now is one of those reservists, 30-year-old Rudy Rockman, a graduate of Columbia University, who is currently ready for battle. Rudy, thanks for being with us tonight. You know, we often talk about citizen soldiers, and this is exactly the case that we're talking about here. Just 8 days ago, you had a far different life and even thoughts of what you were going to be doing. And how has it been for you? Why? Why do you think there is so much fervor and support for what you're doing?
Yes, thank you for having me, first of all. And you have to understand that as reservists, we're civilians to every degree. All of my friends have their wives and their kids at home. They've left their work. I'm currently working on a documentary on the tribes of Israel in Africa. I was supposed to head to Africa very soon. I'm going to most likely have to cancel that trip. And so we all have to put our lives on pause in order to get ready for war. Now, as reservists, we know that a day like this may come. We train for it because Israel is so small. Its current force is not big enough. So when you're a combat soldier, you have to serve as a reservist until age 40. So this is what we're prepared for. And unfortunately, we're at war. This is not a war that we chose. We don't want to take life. We don't want to have to even be put into position to defend life, because that means some of our friends are going to be killed as well. And I don't think the Palestinians chose this war either. It's Hamas that chose this war. It's Hezbollah that chose this war. It's Iran that chose this war. And they clearly have a goal to take the Jews and to drive them into the sea. And we have to do what we can to prevent that. And that's why we're here.
And Rudy, you know, I was just thinking, you know, you're a Columbia University grad, grew up here in Miami, and you are and have been living in Israel. How do you let us know what it is that you all are feeling, and the fears and the trepidations that you may have, but also the commitment to what you see as something that is necessary?
So fear is not an emotion that we have the luxury to have, but obviously we know that if we go to war, not everyone is coming back out. So this is something that we take very seriously. We're not in a situation where we're looking for war and saying, yes, we can't wait to go in. Not at all. We don't want to have to go to war. I mean, it's not a game. It's not a video game. It's not a movie. It's real life. And that's the same thing that happened to us on Saturday. I got the call. It was Shabbat morning, so a week ago about. It was also Sukkot, which is a holiday for the Jewish people. And I'm with my family, and all of a sudden I get a call in the morning saying, you have to come to base. And a few hours later, we were on the border of Gaza fighting in Kfar Aza, which is one of the villages that was hit the worst. And we see the most horrible things that you could ever imagine. The amount of bodies that I saw, I can't even count at how many. And they were burnt, they were cut to pieces, they were shot up, they were stabbed. Men, women, and children. It's something that's going to mark every single person that witnessed that. But this is the reality that we're living in, that we're living in a very tough neighborhood where, unfortunately, there have been narratives that have been lasting for almost 100 years of trying to make the Jews and Israel seem as foreigners when we are the indigenous people of this area. And we need to work together with Palestinians and with other Arab countries in order for us to build a reality that we can all live here together. But unfortunately, there are many news media outlets, not this one currently or others that I've seen right now during this war, but in the past, that have been trying to pin Israel as the source of the problem. And the reality is that the existence of Israel is not the source of the problem. The source of the problem are narratives that show to the people that the only way for us to move forward is for us to be against one another. This idea that to be pro-Palestinian, you have to be anti-Israel, or to be pro the Palestinian in any way, that you have to attack the rights for the Jewish people to exist, or vice versa, that to be pro the Israeli people, you have to be anti-Palestinian, are the exact narratives that are fueling this conflict. And that's what we need to wake up from. And although that we might go into war, when this war settles, we need to realize we made a big mistake here. And how do we look at each other and realize we don't need to have this again?
Rudy Rockman, I thank you very much for being with us. Really appreciate your time. Up next, an inside look at Israel's next moves as it prepares for a ground attack in Gaza. A spokesperson for the Israeli government joins us. Tom will be speaking to him next to discuss when this offensive may happen and how they plan to deal with the underground network of tunnels being used by Hamas. 28 past the hour. Just a short time ago, President Biden addressing the Hamas attack on Israel and the growing humanitarian crisis in Gaza while speaking at the Human Rights Campaign dinner in Washington. Joining us now with the latest details on what the president had to say is NBC's Aaron Gilchrist from the White House. Aaron, good evening. What did the president say?
Jose, good evening to you. The president spoke at the HRC dinner. This is an LGBTQ rights organization that holds an annual event where the president has been in attendance before in other times in his life. And in his comments today, he wove his comments about Israel into the larger remarks about human rights and LGBTQ rights in particular. And he wanted to make sure that he spoke about the humanitarian crisis that is growing almost to the point of being out of control now in Gaza in particular. I want you to hear the beginning of the president's comments on that topic tonight. Listen.
A week ago, we saw hate manifested another way in the worst massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust. More than 1,300 innocent lives lost in Israel, including at least 27 Americans. Children and grandparents alike kidnapped, held hostage by Hamas. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Innocent Palestinian families, and the vast majority have nothing to do with Hamas.
And we know now that the American death toll there in Gaza and in Israel has grown to 29 at this point. Jose, we also know that the president spoke today with Prime Minister Netanyahu. He also spoke with the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas. And in both cases, he talked to them about the need to make sure that there is humanitarian aid flowing into that region, that people in Gaza are able to get access to food and water and medicine. And he's working with the United Nations and other countries in that region to try to make sure that that happens.
Aaron Gilchrist reporting from Washington for us. Aaron, thank you for that. The situation inside Gaza is growing even more desperate. Food, water, and medicine are almost out. And for so many, the journey to the south, where Israel says that they must evacuate to, it's just as dangerous as staying put. Here's NBC's Richard Engel.
Israel has told Palestinians to evacuate Gaza City and head further south in the Gaza Strip to save their lives. Many are trying to leave now, but that's not safe either. This is what it looked like as people were driving on a road they told was cleared for travel. An ambulance was also hit. Heba Al-Attar and her family are heading out of Gaza City nonetheless. But she doesn't know exactly where they're going or how they'll get there. We're dying and everyone is watching. Shame on you, all the Arab countries. We were told to leave, but where? Where to go, she asks. They're shelling people on the roads too. Where are we to go? Heba is leaving a UN-operated school, in theory, a safe place. But the UN has also been told to evacuate, and did. Southern Gaza, where Israel is telling Palestinians to go, is hardly a safe haven. Han Yunis, the main city in southern Gaza, bore the brunt of Israeli airstrikes today. Perhaps because Hamas launched an attack from there. The militants say they broke through the border fence near Han Yunis and attacked Israeli troops. Israel says it has no choice but to go into Gaza to disarm and destroy Hamas. The group today released propaganda videos to show its preparations. Its gunmen attacking with skill and precision and manufacturing their own weapons, including shoulder-carried anti-tank rockets. Hamas says this is what's awaiting Israeli troops. The video ends with Hamas fighters going down into their tunnels, getting ready for what's coming.
Here we go. Our thanks to Richard Engel for that report. And coming up right after this break, I'm going to speak to an Israeli government spokesperson live. We're going to ask him about the latest on the troops movement, aid trying to get into Gaza, and all those Palestinians trying to get out. Stay with us. Welcome back to our continuing live coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. At this hour, we are awaiting what has been described by Israeli Defense Forces as a major escalation in the war against Hamas. Saying in a statement, IDF forces, backed by an extensive logistical effort and by completing the reserve mobilization of hundreds of thousands of servicemen, are preparing to implement a wide range of offensive operative plans, which include, among other things, an integrated and coordinated attack from the air, sea, and land. Joining us now is an Israeli government spokesperson, Eylon Levy, and he joins us live. Eylon, thank you so much. I know you are currently living in a country that is at war, so I appreciate your time talking to us here. My first question is this. You have all of your troops on the border with Gaza. The 24-hour deadline has come and gone. Are you still waiting for Palestinian families to get out of northern Gaza, or is this simply now a waiting game?
On the show. Obviously, I'm not going to get into operational details and discuss the details of when and how Israel is going to continue its response. But I think it's important for viewers to understand the context of what is happening now. This is not another round of fighting in the Gaza Strip. This is not another round in which Israel is aiming to deter Hamas or degrade Hamas. This is a war in which Israel's aim is to dismantle Hamas in the wake of the October 7th massacre last week, which is now the world's worst terror attack after 9/11. The death toll from the October 7th massacre, when Hamas entered Israeli towns and villages and shot everyone they saw, beheaded people, burning people, the death toll is now nearly half of 9/11 in absolute terms. And Israel has decided in response to this massacre, in response to this horrific atrocity, what President Biden just a few days ago called sheer, pure, unadulterated evil, that its aim this time is to dismantle Hamas's abilities as a military organization and governing organization inside the Gaza Strip. That is the purpose of the Israeli operation at the moment, and that is why Israel is very clear that it is only just beginning in its efforts to dismantle Hamas inside the Gaza Strip so that it can never, ever, ever again perpetrate the same atrocities that we saw on October 7th, or even with a much lower bar, ever commit any harm to Israeli civilians again, because we have not only a right, but a duty to defend ourselves against this kind of ISIS-style barbarism.
Eylon, what happens if you are successful, you dismantle Hamas? What happens next in Gaza?
As the international community is going to understand that whatever happens is going to be an arrangement that leaves in place the Israeli people's inalienable right to live in security. For too long, the international community has been putting pressure on Israel to create the conditions that have ultimately allowed Hamas to be able to perpetrate atrocities against Israel by manipulating the humanitarian aid that has gone into Gaza, manipulating the shipments of concrete, manipulating the entry of electricity.
Elan, I understand that. I appreciate. Elan, I appreciate that. And again, I understand your country is at war, but I am trying to understand what happens after you dismantle Hamas. What happens after you try to eradicate Hamas? What happens to the millions of Palestinians that are going to live there? They're going to live occupied? Is Israel going to stay there? I'm just trying to understand what the end game in this is. And I can understand if that hasn't been figured out yet as well.
For 16 years, the Palestinians inside the Gaza Strip have been living under the brutal Hamas dictatorship, a regime that brooks no dissent, that treats dissenters with extreme brutality, that has brutalized the Gaza Strip, that has exploited every little morsel of international goodwill and Israeli goodwill in order to turn the Gaza Strip into a terror nest against Israel that can be used to attack, butcher, brutalize, behead Israelis inside. What we're dealing with inside the Gaza Strip is a presence of pure, sheer, unadulterated evil. And we know too clearly, both as Jews from our history and as human beings, that sheer, pure, unadulterated evil is to be eradicated. Because the reality inside the Gaza Strip now is essentially the worst case scenario, the worst option imaginable. And we hope to work with international partners in the future to make sure that the system that is put in place in the Gaza Strip is such that protects not only the rights of Israelis to live in security, but also does not subject the Palestinians to a regime that abuses all international goodwill in order to advance its goals of terror against Israel.
Elan, I want to talk about that international goodwill because I know there's a jumbo jet full of emergency supplies, medical supplies that is sitting in Egypt. The World Health Organization has appealed to Israel to please allow them to bring that aid in. I'm trying to understand what is Israel's stance in not letting that aid enter into Gaza, where you know, because I know you have seen the pictures, people are struggling to survive there right now, and there's that mass movement of Palestinians to try to get out to the south.
The situations and the scenes inside the Gaza Strip are very difficult to watch, and I have to say, everyone in this country is emotionally exhausted and pulverized from the gruesome images that we've been seeing on our screens since the October 7th massacre. But it's really important to understand what the situation on the ground is in Israel. On Saturday morning, Hamas attacked and destroyed the crossing between Israel and the Gaza Strip, the Erez crossing. It went into the crossing, it mowed down everyone it could, it blew up as many facilities as it could, and that crossing is no longer operational. Not only that, but the entire situation is a war zone right now. We've had over 6,000 rockets fired at Israel in the space of the last week, many of those rockets and mortars flying almost on a minute-by-minute basis on the area immediately adjacent to the Gaza Strip, such that essentially the only entry into Israel, the only access, the open points from Israel and the Gaza Strip are the holes in the fence that Hamas blew up when it sent in its death squads on Saturday morning in order to butcher, behead, burn, and brutalize Israelis. Israel does not have an obligation to continue supplying the resources the enemy needs in order to continue advancing its assault against Israeli civilians. But also the situation on the ground is such that Israel cannot be reasonably expected to allow deliveries through border crossings that no longer exist.
Elan Levy for the Israeli government. Elan, we appreciate your time. Thank you. Still ahead right here in the special coverage, the challenges of Israel's impending ground invasion. We will be joined by retired four-star General Barry McCaffrey next to discuss the complexities of moving forces into Gaza and trying to recover hostages without harming them in the process.
.47 past the hour. Right now, the world awaits a ground invasion of the Gaza Strip. There are also concerns Hezbollah fighters situated north of Israel in Lebanon could get involved. Another challenge, keeping travel corridors open for innocent Palestinians to get out of harm's way. And, of course, the dozens of hostages being held inside and underground in Gaza. It's clear there are many challenges in the coming days, weeks, possibly months for the Israeli Defense Force. I want to bring in retired four-star U.S. General Barry McCaffrey, who is now a military analyst for MSNBC. General, thank you very much for being with us. How complicated, difficult, and bloody is this ground invasion going to be?
Well, it's going to be a terrible mess. Clearly, millions of Gazan civilians are at risk, trying to move out of the fighting area, trying to find humanitarian relief. The IDF conducting a ground attack into this urban area is going to suffer significant casualties. I think they have no option. This is an ongoing military action to deny impunity to Hamas after the slaughter of hundreds and hundreds of Israeli civilians on 7 October. So we're about to watch a very straightforward 100,000 plus Israeli troops go in and try and smash Hamas badly enough so the Israelis get a couple of 3 years of peace.
You know, General, I want to know your sense of those hostages possibly being rescued. And earlier in the broadcast, Raf Sanchez brought up the name of Gilad Shalit, who was an Israeli soldier held for 5 years by Hamas. Israel had to trade 1,000 Palestinian prisoners to get that one soldier back. And now we're talking about more than 100 hostages, babies, Americans. What are the chances that the Israeli forces, the U.S. forces, can get those hostages out?
Well, it may well be more than 200 hostages. I don't think the Israelis really have a clear fix on it yet. They're dispersed, they're underground. There is almost zero chance of intelligence locating and isolating, their safety. Many of them are undoubtedly going to perish in this coming assault. The Israelis will make every attempt to avoid civilian casualties, but at the same time, they'll offer rewards. They'll take hostages of Hamas political leaders and try and bargain to get them back. They probably get many of them back, but it's a terribly dangerous situation. Again, you're not going to find them unless you dominate the ground surface and then go underground with tunnel rats. I've done that kind of fighting. It's pistols, silencers, hand grenades, tear gas. That's what is facing the IDF right now, to try and get some of these hostages back.
General, it's been 16 years since the Israelis were in there. Much has changed in Gaza. Much has stayed the same. What are the most significant challenges that the IDF is going to have in trying to find these hostages? And you described it very well, but what are the biggest challenges?
Well, you get 30,000 maybe armed Hamas fighters. Many of them will be determined to fight to the death. They'll be fighting out of urban areas, which favors the defense. They'll be using remotely piloted vehicles, anti-tank weapons. The Israelis will go in fast from multiple axes of advance. But then the trouble will start. They'll dominate the surface, and they'll have to, over the space of weeks, not days, they'll have to try and find the hostages and exterminate Hamas. It's not going to be easy. It's an unenviable task, all triggered by Hamas' terrible massacre of Israelis. They will not have a moment's peace if the IDF doesn't take apart Hamas.
General Barry McCaffrey, we thank you for your analysis tonight in this coverage. Still ahead, grieving and praying for peace, how Jewish people mark the first Shabbat since the Hamas attack. We'll show you. Finally tonight from here in Tel Aviv, Saturday was the first Jewish Sabbath since the attacks happened last week, and it was a day of remembrance and of reflection at synagogues here and around the world.
We are learning to be strong.
Tonight, Jews across Israel and around the world are finding solace in the Sabbath. A day of rest and reflection, now a time to grieve, to lean on faith and search for courage in community.
It is a lot of comfort being with friends, trying to find hope in our souls, trying to pray with deep belief, to find comfort.
In Tel Aviv, the Beit Daniel Synagogue reopening today. A handful of congregants like Edna Baromi Perlman finding strength in song.
I feel that we're sort of like embracing each other with the liturgy and the music, and it's like therapeutic for me, totally therapeutic.
Her rabbi, Meir Azari's mission is to give support during these unimaginable times.
We're grieving in this point. We lost people in our community. But in this point, we have to hear the hope for victory, and at the same time to rebuild the Israeli society, the peace process. We need the peace.
And near Lebanon today, signs of faith in the field. A soldier clutching the Torah amid uncertain days ahead.
Will be the joyous heart.
Across the globe this Shabbat, hymns.
We have survived unspeakable trauma, and we will survive this too.
In Washington, D.C., prayers for peace.
In a moment where I have this week felt raw and fragile with emotion, this is who I wanted to be surrounded by and who I felt could give me strength and the hugs that I needed.
To New York City with one of the largest synagogues in the world.
I think there's something about coming together and feeling that, there's solidarity and strength and unity. It's very important as an American and as a Jew.
This is an important time for all of us as human beings. This is not just about Jewish people.
Back here in Israel, these candles, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of faith can never be put out.
And Jose, we know it's not only Jews praying around the world, it's people like me and you praying for the people involved in this war, these Israeli families that were just torn apart by those terrorists, the hostages that have their children, and those families in Gaza right now, those Palestinians that are caught up in the middle of all this, families as well, losing loved ones, trying to get out and no place to go. And the sad reality, Jose, that this is likely just starting.
Yeah, and Tom, I think about how different the world was just 8 days ago before a group whose reason to exist is the destruction of the Jewish people massacred so many men, women, and children. And yes, where there's always hope, there's also the fear that the suffering is just going to get even worse in the days, weeks, and months to come. Tommy Ellis, that wraps up this special report. I'm Jose Diaz-Balart. Thank you to my dear friend and colleague, Tom, for the last 2 hours from Tel Aviv. Please stay safe, my friend. Coverage of the Israel-Hamas war continues ahead.